Hello folks, it's Paul here. I've got a packing video for you. I'm currently breaking up what we're packing. This is the infamous Zaghloul by Nakhla. This is a more traditional black moissel. It is a very strong, very potent tobacco regarding nicotine with a very intense flavor, but no flavoring whatsoever. Remember, Zaghloul is a black moissel, which means that there's no flavoring, just tobacco and molasses. That's what you got. So, sitting here in front of this big pile of other black moissel that I enjoy smoking is a Egyptian clay bowl. This is actually one of the bowls that came with my one of my Khalil Mamoun pipes, but I found that this bowl works really well because it's pretty shallow and very wide. Remember, you're going to need a lot of heat when you actually have this one going. Let's see. So, all I'm going to do is break up the tobacco. Remember, this stuff is very sticky, so even though I'm like breaking it up with my fork, you end up getting a lot of these very, very dense balls. You really want to make sure that this actually gets quite broken up. Because it's so dense, if you don't break it up, the heat won't get to enough of the tobacco. You're just going to burn one layer, and you won't actually get a good session. Don't worry about getting your fingers dirty. That's going to happen. I mean, it's just kind of par for the course for prepping a tobacco like this. Now, what we're shooting for here is actually a pretty, as loose as you can get it, but a pretty high pack. I'm not overpacking this. I'm not going to be piling this up over the top of the rim. But this is pretty heat-resistant stuff, and you're going to want a lot of... Excuse me for a second. You're going to want a lot of very intense and almost direct heat. One of the ways to achieve this is by packing very high. Just a little bit more and we'll be good. Alright, that should be pretty good. Just a smidge more. You know what? Why not? It's actually better to overpack this a little bit than it is to underpack it. Underpacking just means that you're going to get no smoke, barely any flavor, and not a good session at all. Overpacking usually just means you need to wait for the bowl to cool down a little bit. Okay. There we go. It's about as good as it's going to get. Now, I know that by modern standards, this looks really overpacked, and you're going to assume that it will burn really, really badly. You know, if I was using a modern tobacco, that would definitely be true. But now we're going to put on a single layer of regular foil. Press down a little bit to pack down the tobacco inside, and then pull tight. You basically want the smallest possible gap between the foil and the tobacco, and if it touches a little bit, that's not a huge deal. You're just trying to make sure that the tobacco is not in direct contact with the coals. So that should do well. And up next is poking the holes, but I'll be right back. I'm going to actually clean off this fork and my really grody looking fingers. Okay, we are back, and it is time to poke some holes in the foil. So, like I said, remember, you want a lot of heat to get to this tobacco. So basically, you're just going to fill up the foil with holes. It should just be the scantest of barriers between the coals and the tobacco itself. This is kind of like the Tangiers style of poking holes that I've shown you before, and it works really well with stuff like this. See, there you go. Lots of airflow, big open holes, and you're going to need, a lot of coal on top of this to get it smoking properly, which we'll go over in our next video, which is going to be on heat managing Zaghloul. Alright, I know that at least one person is already upset that I am putting foil on Zaghloul and teaching people that this is the right way to pack it. The truth is, yes, you can smoke it minus the foil. All you do is you stop before you apply the foil. Every other step is entirely the same. But the complaint that I hear most is that this isn't the traditional way. This isn't the true way to smoke Black Moassul or Zaghloul. That's not true. Yeah, that's just false. Originally speaking, like traditionally speaking, Moassul was made for indirect heat. They didn't have tin foil, they didn't have aluminum foil at the time, but what was used was a very thin brass screen that would go over the top of the bowl. Moassul was made for indirect heat. The only traditional hookah tobaccos that are made for direct heat are things like tombak or tombek. They are just dried tobacco leaves that are chopped up, soaked, and then put directly into a bowl with coals on top of that, or they're wrapped around the stem, or a very, very special kind of like stem cigar-shaped bowl, and then coals are balanced on top of that. But Moassul came about as the modern version of that tobacco. Yes, that's what I'm saying. At one point in time, Moassul, which is tobacco mixed with molasses, was the fruity version, was the candied version of a more traditional tobacco. I know that a lot of us think of this as the oldest form of hookah tobacco, but it's not. This, at one time, was the Starbuzz of its day. I know that that sounds strange. But what all of this comes back to is that originally speaking, traditionally speaking, it was made for indirect heat. That gives you the most broad range of subtle flavors, the most intense and interesting and unique flavors. When you add coals directly to the tobacco, you basically just get smoky, intense, bitter, sour tobacco, which for some people, not a bad thing. In fact, I kind of like that. But you lose a lot of the subtlety. With something like Zaghloul, which already is a very intense kind of bitter tobacco, that's not a huge problem. There's not a lot of subtlety to lose, honestly. But if you have something like, like the Alaras or the Hills Brothers Jirac or things like that, if you're smoking that with direct heat, I don't like you. You are doing a huge disservice to that tobacco, and you're, well, to be honest, ruining a really, really beautiful product. All right, and I'm sitting here enjoying that session that I packed up, and yeah, this is, to me, the way to smoke Nakhla Zaghloul. So this is Paul for Hookah.org saying thanks very much for joining us. Please go down below, like, and subscribe, and I'm going to send you guys off with the very wispy but very flavorful clouds that come out of Nakhla Zaghloul. Thank you very much. Happy smoking.